does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes forth from the mouth of God.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Before the feast of Passover, Jesus knew what his hour had come to pass from this world to the Father. He loved his own in the world, and he loved them to the end. The devil had already induced Judas, son of Simon the Iscariot, to hand him over. So during supper, fully aware that the Father had put everything into his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God, he rose from supper and took off his outer garments. He took a towel and tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and dry them with a towel around his waist. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Master, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered and said to him, "What I am doing, you do not understand now, but you will understand later." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered him, "Unless I wash you, you will have no inheritance with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Master, then not only my feet, but my hands and head as well." Jesus said to him, "Whoever has bathed has no need except to have his feet washed, for he is clean all over. So you are clean, but not all." For he knew who would betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." So when he had washed their feet and put his garments back on and reclined at table again, he said to them, "Do you realize what I have done for you? You call me teacher and master, and rightfully so, for indeed I am. If I, therefore, the master and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. I have given you a model to follow, so that as I have done for you, you should also do." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Wow. Thank God. You know, I had a dream that I was transferred back to Lebanon. So what are you doing here? Sometimes we experience that. Life is like a dream and not the dream we see in movies. Life is like we see a foggy version of ourselves, and we're doing things that we shouldn't be, or we're not doing things that we should be. And we look at that person almost as though it's in a dream. and saying, who is that? Because that's not the person I want to be. That's not the person I always hoped I would be. Why haven't I yet obtained those things that I need for my life? Why have I not yet purged my life of those things that I do not need, nor desire, nor any good for me? There's an ancient parable told by a Native American chief to his brave. And the brave was really frustrated because he did the things he didn't want to do, and he didn't do the things he wanted to do, much like St. Paul. And the chief said to him, there are two wolves at war inside each one of us. The one wolf, malice and deceit, greed, impurity, avarice, fornication, sloth, pride. The other wolf, goodness, purity, charity, modesty, humility, all those good things that make us better. And the young brave said to the chief, which wolf will win? And he replied, the one that you feed. The one that you feed will win. This is not a new idea. If we go back to the time of Moses, even before, to the time of Abraham, they believed that they were theologically schizophrenic. Schizo means cut or split, and phronos is the head, the face. That they believed that there was an evil impulse inside of everyone, the Yetzer Hara, and an equally good impulse, the Yetzer HaTov. And we were always trying for that Yetzer HaTov, trying to let that shine, while the Yetzer Hara was constantly pushing down on that. And so we see this even today. We are not simply human persons. We are not simply a corpus. That we have a spiritual side too. My niece Sophia, who is 7, I don't think my sister knew when she named her Sophia, Sophia meant wisdom. But Sophia has much wisdom for everyone, whether you want it or not. And one day Sophia says to my sister, why do we eat rice and beans all the time? And my sister said, well, you're part Puerto Rican. And she said, well, I'm part English too. And it's true. We are corporeal, we're bodily, but we're part spirit too. And if some of us fed our bodies the way we feed our spirits, we would be walking skeletons. We would look emaciated everywhere we went. And so sometimes it's good that we take that into consideration and we look at this. For these 3 evenings, I would like to focus on the encyclical Laudato Si. Now, this is by no means the Cliff Notes, so you got to read it yourself. I'm going to draw from this. And rumor has it the Pope is in town right now. That's probably where everybody else is. You know, I was at Good Samaritan Hospital yesterday, and I was going up the elevator, and someone saw I was a priest, obviously, and they said, hey, aren't you going to Philly tomorrow? I said, no, I'm going to Hershey. And they said, well, the Pope's in Philly. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm going to Hershey, because that place is going to be crazy. But certainly our Pope has brought many things to his papacy and to our church, and one of them is this encyclical. So I want to focus on it, the humane first, of humans. Then naturae, of nature. And then we kind of sew the two together in what's called dominion, not domination, but dominion. We have to have the humane before we have the naturae. Otherwise, the naturae doesn't matter much. You know, so I want to focus on relationship. And I'll start by reading from Laudato Si. God has given the earth to man, who must use it with respect for the original good purpose for which it was given. But man, too, is God's gift to man. He must therefore respect the natural and moral structure with which he has been endowed. He goes on to say, it's troubling that when some ecological movements defend the integrity of the environment rightly demanding that certain limits be imposed on scientific research, they sometimes fail to apply those same limits to human life. In other words, the focus is so much on nature and protecting nature. And in our experiments and what we do scientifically, we have to be so careful. We don't want to disturb the balance. But that does not apply when humans are involved. And so what he's saying is, first we must focus on this humanity. And that kind of begs the question, brought up again and again, why are we here? Why are we here? And I would suggest, if we are being the best being, and being as God wants us to be, then we are being the best. In other words, if we're doing what God wants us to do, regardless of the sacrifice or the discomfort that's involved, we will be the best person we can be. That's how He created us. A few weeks ago, I was supposed to go on a fishing trip, and the office called me and they said, this woman is dying and she wants to see you. Now, I knew the priest had been there several times before, but it was never me. On that week, Father Samson had always been on call, so he went to see her. And so I called this person. I was disappointed, obviously, but I called this person and canceled. And I went to see this woman. And the moment I walked in the door, she started sobbing. And she grabbed my hands. And she said, I have been waiting for you. And she talked for about an hour of all the things she was afraid of. None of it had to do with the afterlife. Most of it had to do with the process she was going through in this world to get to the afterlife. And even after I left there, I was glad I went, certainly, and those experiences are always moving, but I was still a little down, you know? And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to go to the steakhouse and get something to eat. Because food is the answer to everything. And so I'm sitting there at this steakhouse, sitting at the bar, and just, you know, thinking over different things, looking at the TV in front of me. And this guy comes up out of nowhere. He's the manager there. And I had not seen him since high school. I was in school with him from first grade all the way through high school. And so the next hour, as I'm eating there and enjoying the time, we talked about old times, we laughed, and it was amazing. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I was so high when I left there from that experience, and we're still in touch. And I think, I wonder how many opportunities we have robbed ourselves of. Because we didn't take the hard road, we took the easy one. Or we took the thing that seemed like it was going to be a lot more fun, and we missed out. How many times we robbed ourselves? So why am I here? What is the humanity? And what does that have to do with how I interact? The second thing is nature. What am I to do? I'm not here alone. None of us is an island. And I say that even with the larger picture, animals, plants, the environment as well, as he does in Laudato Si. And then finally, what does it mean to have this dominion? It comes from the word dominos, which means Lord. And the Lord provided everything for those in his kingdom. Provided everything. Took care of it. Was more of a steward, realizing that nothing belongs to us. We are simply stewards to whom these are entrusted. So how do we deal with this humanity? He goes on in Laudato Si to say this. And this is his concern. The technological paradigm or model has become so dominant that it would be difficult to do without its resources, and even more difficult to utilize them without being dominated by their internal logic. It has become countercultural to choose a lifestyle whose goals are even partly independent of technology, of its costs, its power to globalize, and make us all the same. Technology tends to absorb everything in its ironclad logic, and those who are surrounded with technology know full well that it moves forward in the final analysis neither for profit nor for the well-being of the human race. It was so interesting as I was coming across watching people leave Mass. And as they left Mass, they shook the priest's hand, except those who wanted to ignore him and walk out the side way. And immediately they pulled out their electronics. It's almost as though it were calling to them. Look at me. See what you've missed in that hour. Check me out. Update. Post a picture or whatever else. It does have control over us. We had a retreat a few months ago. And on the retreat, the first thing that the students did, the teenagers, is they deposited their cell phone in a shoe holder we had posted on the wall. And they turned it off. And it was the last day of the retreat. It was only 2.5 days. They were almost going like this. They had the shakes and the sweats, You could almost see it. And so it really does dominate us in a certain way. I think this is one of the main problems if we are trying to interact with other people, especially within our own family. If we have the choice to talk to a machine or interact with a machine, it's much easier than interacting with a person. And so that's one of the things that begins to chip away. Our Holy Father recently, he was speaking about families down in Philadelphia, and he said, no family is perfect. No father is perfect. No mother is perfect. No mother-in-law is perfect. When he said that, like the crowd just roared. And so he knew he hit a nerve, and he said, let me share some mother-in-law jokes with you. And I'll tell you two that he said. He said, what's the difference between an in-law and an outlaw? Outlaws are wanted. He said, I was at the zoo and someone ran up to me and said, Holy Father, please pray. My mother-in-law fell in the alligator pit. And he said, I will pray for her. And he said, no, pray for the alligators. That was your Pope who said that, not me. So don't come after me on this. I'm just repeating. But it kind of begs the question, why do people love him so much? People are crazy for this guy. He can get away with that without being offensive. What is it that he has here? When we talk about the human person, and as much as he wants us to interact with other people and to try to see the best in people, he hasn't changed any of the rules of the church. Check them out. In fact, some reporter said to him, don't you think you lean to the far left of the church? And he said, I haven't said anything that is not in the church's social doctrine. And I am ready to recite the creed at any moment. And it's true. So if he hasn't changed any of the rules, he streamlined the annulment process a little bit, but he didn't say you don't have to get an annulment. He hasn't changed any of the rules. So what is so different? The difference is he is stressing the mercy of Christ. In Deus Caritas Est, Benedict XVI even says this. He said, God's love for humanity and his desire to forgive is so great that it pits him up against himself. It pits his love against his justice and his mercy against his justice. His love is so great. So it's about the mercy that he wants us to be treated with mercy. There is a book by Peter Van Bremen, who actually is another Jesuit. And he says this about forgiveness. Forgiveness is the courageous act of an alert person who breaks through the deceptive enchantment of evil and tries to liberate even the enemy from sterile isolation. In other words, one forgives because they don't even want their enemies to be alienated, don't want their enemies to be isolated. This is the mercy that he seems to be extending wherever he goes. Again, he's not changing the rules. So we have to be careful that we don't say mercy equals compromise. He's not compromising himself. He's not watering down the faith. It's like the gospel we heard tonight, the washing of the feet. Jesus washes all 12 disciples' feet. He washes them all. But he says one of them's still not clean. He extended mercy to Judas, and Judas is still not clean. Peter was a sinner so sinful, he said, I don't want you to wash my feet at all. And then he wanted him to wash his whole body. And so Jesus is extending mercy here. But not all people can receive that mercy because they do not desire it. It necessitates a change in our own life. And if we're unwilling to change, then we really don't need the mercy of God. Who is the one group of people that Jesus condemned in Scripture? The Pharisees and scribes. He condemned them. He didn't judge them. He condemned them. He said, woe to you, which is pretty much saying, curse you. Because they are the only ones who didn't believe they needed forgiveness. They were self-righteous, not righteous. He says to the others, your sins are forgiven you, go and don't do it again. So he doesn't say, go and it's okay, do whatever you want. So he extends the mercy of God and he welcomes people in because of the love he has. So I imagine if you were in Philadelphia today, you would hear something like, El amor de Dios es más grande que alguno mal. La misericordia de Dios y la gracia de Dios es más poderoso que alguno mal. Grace and the love and the mercy of God is more powerful than any evil ever. The love and the grace and the mercy of God. And that's why he wishes to extend it to everyone. And so in order to receive that grace, we first have to expose the mal, the evil. Nobody wants to do that. How many of you would like the doctor who finds the tumor and says to you, you know what, go on a diet, exercise, and we'll check it in a year or two? No. Get that out of me. Excise it. Take it out. You know, there was a priest here a number of years ago, and he would only allow one of those bushes in front of the rectory to be cut low and trim it. He wanted the other one big and bushy, because every now and then he'd like to smoke a cigar and he didn't want people to see it. Now that priest is long gone from here, about a year and a half ago. But the fact is, we can hide a lot of stuff, but that doesn't make it better. You know, if you have the tumor, I don't want the doctor that's going to make me feel good about it. I want the doctor who's going to take it away and then try to cure whatever remnants might be there. And so we must do the same. No one likes to look at it. No one likes to hear bad news. But the good news is we have an opportunity that we have been given to remove it all, to leave it behind, and to move forward. That is the humanity that we're talking about. Pope Francis has said this will be a year of mercy. It will begin in December. A year of mercy. A year to look at ourselves, although we may see this dream person, this person that doesn't look like us, they resemble us, but that's not the person I want to be. And to purge ourselves of all those things that drag us down. Those things that make us less than what we should be. And so, it's fascinating, if you look in the Old Testament, David always wanted to build a temple. He wanted to build one, God said no. We always like to build things. I know even, it seems when I go to a new parish that there's something to build or there's something to work on, and we like to do that. We like to build something brand new. We like the smell of it. We like the look of it. And it's our own design. And I believe we like to do that so much because it's a lot harder to renovate. It's a lot harder to retrofit things. Well, here's the building. And we need to retrofit. We need to renovate. Laudato Si is his encyclical on the care for our common home. And we will talk about the environment in which we live. But in the ancient world, remember, the heart was called the home, the domus. So this care for our common home is also the care for this home that we have in common. All of us are in need of the mercy of God. All of us. Not one of us is without that need. However, some of us might be without that desire. If we continue to malnourish our spirits, then all we will cling to is the corporeal things of the world, and that will always lead to death. About 2 months ago, I had a funeral for a 20-year-old, had an aggressive form of cancer. And I remember speaking to him shortly after he was diagnosed, and I was so amazed at his faith. Aren't you scared? No, I'm not scared. Well, why aren't you scared? I'd be scared. Because I have faith. I know that God is going to help to get me through this. And even when he was over here at the medical center, and I was reluctant to celebrate Mass in his room, I went there and I said, listen, I'll celebrate Mass for you, but I don't want you to feel guilty or if you say no. And he couldn't speak at that point, so he just gave me the thumbs up. And we celebrated Mass. And then I got called in later that day because this was it. They took him off life support. It was going bad. And so I anointed him again. I went in later that night, and of course my arch nemesis Pius was there. You know, whenever Pius is in the room, you can't be the center of attention. And he knew I was going to talk about him. That's why I went to Nigeria, I think. But he was in the room, and I walked in, and I thought a miracle had occurred, because here's this kid, he's swabbing his own mouth with all kinds of sodas, and he's actually speaking. It really was miraculous. And as the days went on and he got weaker, he kept doing this 1, 3, 1, 3. And we're thinking, okay, 3 persons, 1 God. We're trying to decode all this stuff. And he would just pray. And the family was very devout, so there was a lot of prayer in the room. 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3. And then he'd go 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1. Well, he did finally succumb to the illness, and he died. And after they had taken him off of life support, it was exactly 3 days and 1 hour, and he died. He was very much in touch with something far beyond what this world could offer. It explains his peace. For a 20-year-old, it explains his peace. And in a world that sometimes can be so overwhelming for us, many times it's overwhelming because we don't have that other side engaged. We don't have the spiritual side engaged. That many, even during this time I was talking, might have checked their electronic device. And if you do get a call during this service, I hope you answer it. And I hope it's God. And if it is, I imagine I know what question he would ask. Can you hear me now? In the days ahead, as we think about the way that God created us out of love for our own sake, that he created us as a gift to each other as well, that we look at the ways that he is trying to engage us, that he is trying to help us to engage with one another, that we look at the things that have crept in our lives over the years, and we begin that purge, and we fill those vacuous spaces with something that will draw us closer to him and to each other. And when we can begin to value that in our own person, we will be able to easily answer the question, why am I here? Which begs the second question, what am I to do? And so that's what we will address tomorrow evening as we reflect on Laudato Si, praise be to you. That we look at each other in a different way because we see them with God's eyes. And that's really the beginning of being a person who is set apart. In the ancient world, they called them the Hagioi, the Sanctus, the saints.